Welcome to Equilibrium Echoes, the podcast where we delve into the transformative power of your inner world on your relationships. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. Join me as we unlock the secrets of emotional equilibrium and dig deep into the tools and insights needed to foster healthier, more fulfilling relationships in ways that feel safe and authentic. Welcome back to Equilibrium Echoes. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. This is the final episode of season 2, and I'm very excited about this one. I'm here with guest Angel Luke from foodmysteries.com. She is a registered dietitian, and today we're going to talk about the connection between nutrition and our mental work that we do, our state of mind work that we do, all those narratives and things that we tell ourselves, as well as our overall wellness and how nutrition connects to this whole sphere of wellness that we talk about in this podcast. So Angel, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Alyssa. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So tell us a little bit about you and your background and kind of how you ended up doing what it is that you do.
Sure. So I'm born and raised from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. I really just enjoyed nutrition as I was growing up. I had an amazing home ec teacher that just made me feel like my career path has to do something with food. And I also just grew up in a way that I matured faster than a lot of my peers the same age because I kind of watched my mom take care of the three of us, and I'm the youngest of three, carrying that load of taking care of all three of us while my dad actually had to travel abroad for work a lot of the times. And at some points of our journey, it was hard to keep food on the table. At other parts, it was just watching her being lonely and trying to please everyone around her and cope. And I also kind of saw glimpses, now that I'm an adult looking back, like of her using a little bit of food to cope and sort of the journey that led her on. So where it's led me in my current position as a registered dietitian of over 12 years now is I really have a strong interest in helping women find what some of their triggers may be in terms of emotional triggers that lead them to maybe using food to cope. And then for people who are struggling as new moms, because I think I saw my mom struggle as a child. And then when I was a new mom, twice now, I also had my own struggles with just making sure that everyone, including my baby, was okay. My in-laws are okay. Like just everyone was okay. And yet I felt like some moments I wasn't okay. And I didn't exactly know what to do about that. So I guess where it's led me in my current project, my latest project is something called Team VIP Moms, is making sure that moms are also taken care of as they try to pour in to other people's lives.
I love that. All right. So this is a whole thing. Like we could go so many different directions with this, and there's a lot to unpack here. But let's start with this idea of using food to cope, because let's define what that means and kind of talk about what you see as a dietitian and how that sort of plays out, because I do think that is a very common thing, whether it's just a little bit of a thing or whether we completely rely on that as a means of emotionally supporting ourselves.
For sure. I mean, in my line of work, I see trends. So for about 7 years of my career, I was actually working with our health authorities' metabolic and bariatric weight loss surgery program. And during that time, like I was really humbled as I listened to countless stories and had countless tears in my office. And the trends that I saw were that people that struggled with circumstances at home or just life in general would go to food for four main reasons. And these are my categories. One of the reasons might be out of stress. So just trying to have temporary relief from whatever it was. Secondly, it would be boredom. So a lot of times it's loneliness. It's in those quiet moments of the night when everyone is taken care of and everything is quiet that they can feel those feelings of loneliness and needing some companionship. And it could be boredom that leads them there. It could also be comfort. So comfort just in the form of, again, needing that temporary, short-lived comfort from whatever it is that they're dealing with at the moment or chronically. And then finally, it's actually celebration. So it's not always negative. It's also that feeling of, wow, like my son's going off to college, or, my baby just turned a milestone or a corner or whatever it is. And they want to further enhance those wonderful feelings using food as well.
So why is this a negative thing? Like, why, when we talk about this, I mean, I think people are already sensing that we're using a negative connotation here. So why is that a negative thing?
Oftentimes when we use food, it's because we're trying to fill a deeper need. And that deeper need, while food can be a part of it, and if you occasionally use food as one of the strategies, my personal opinion is that it's not a huge deal if it was one of many tools to cope. The issue is more when it's the only or one of very few coping mechanisms and it's repeatedly used. That's when the issue grows larger. I think as healthcare professionals, we're always trying to put more tools in people's toolbox. And so it's not, we never, well, now we really don't want to say like good food, bad food, or certain behaviors, but it's more like, what else can we do so that you don't just defer to food only because we haven't spent the time and the effort to help you find other ways to also celebrate or feel less bored or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with someone, several months ago now, who was talking about she coaches women through sobriety and making a decision to give up alcohol altogether, even just, socially drinking. And one of the things that she pointed out was that a lot of our alcohol consumption is tied to celebration. It's not always that you're sitting alone at home being miserable.
Yes.
A lot of it is like, let's go out with friends and have a good time, or, there's a big occasion and we're going to open a bottle of wine, whatever that is. And food is definitely the same way, isn't it? Like in our society, food in general is so tied to celebrations and events and gatherings. Like it's almost kind of unusual now to have a social gathering or hang out with friends where there isn't some kind of food involved. So what is your perspective on that? Like, how do we start to like kind of separate the two? Like maybe I can not, I don't know, like maybe not everything has to be food related. I'm thinking about it and I'm just like, every time we have a party or we have friends over, like food is kind of one of the central components of that. And it's such a part of our society today. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I echo your sentiments because, I grew up in an Asian culture. I think every culture actually centers around food in some way, shape, or form. And for a lot of my life, I've actually been going to church, and we know how to throw a good potluck and good celebrations frequently as well. So I don't think that we can ever fully make a clean cut because I think food should be social. I think food should continue to mark wonderful celebrations and moments, and also not only in those happy moments, but also bring comfort in those moments of, you attend a funeral and then there's that after reception where we're gathered again around food. So I don't think, personally, I don't think the goal would be to have a black and white separation from the food, but rather, I think that I often use this analogy. It's that, do you feel like you're in the driver's seat when you're making certain food decisions? Because if you're feeling more like a passenger and you're just driven by external circumstances, and sometimes internal, to go for that food item, and it actually, whatever you're trying to solve has nothing to do with actually the food, but rather a different, deeper longing, then that's when we need to have a conversation about putting food in its place. And what I mean by that is, putting food in its place means you're the driver of it. If you decide that you're going to have that piece of whatever or that drink of whatever, it's because you desire it and you're going to have it, and you're going to have it with the people you want to have it with. But you're not feeling this unnecessary internal turmoil that's driving you to put something into your mouth that you don't want to. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I was just thinking as you were talking, like one of the challenging things, I'm going off on a little tangent here, but with children, raising children, we do a lot of traveling where we stay in people's homes, relatives' homes. And so I always tell them, like, whatever grandma makes for dinner is what you're eating. And so I'm just going all the
I
way
can
back to
relate.
childhood and like some of the messages that we send, even to our kids as they're growing up, can maybe we need to rethink some of those. But it is a fine line because I'm not going to let my kids be rude to grandma about the creamed peas she made for dinner. So I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but as a mom, like how do you see some of those childhood messages coming into play and how do you deal with that?
Oh man, like professionally, I have a standard messaging. And then in my personal life, I don't want to lie to anyone. It is a struggle. And like you say, especially when in Asian culture, there's a very strong listen to your elders, like just we're always a step below. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the message that I have for parents is I really want us to think about there's something called the divisions of responsibility. So within a feeding relationship, whether your children are like mine, like 5 and 8 years old or older, we really want to make sure that as the caregiver, we just assume our responsibilities, which is we control what we're offering, where we're offering it. So at the dining table instead of in front of the TV, and when we're offering it. So having set meal times. And the child, however old, will control and be responsible for how much they eat, as well as whether or not they choose to eat. And I think by establishing that very firm boundary around who is responsible for what from an early age, that helps alleviate the burden that the caregiver has, and then also send proper messaging to the child so that they don't lose those skills that they're actually born with. The skill of I'll eat when I'm hungry, I'll stop when I'm full. I know it's easier said than done because again, I've raised two and I'm still raising them. But I have to say that if we start, whenever we start, because maybe today is the first time that some people are listening about this, no matter when we start this, if we stick to it, I think the entire household will have a little bit less stress, especially around meal times.
Yeah, I like that. It's not about clean your plate. It's about here are your choices.
That's right.
you know. Yes. I've started with my preschooler. She gets a fruit, a vegetable, and then something else in her lunch, and she'll come home very often with the vegetable still left. And I want a snack, I want a snack. And I'll say, okay, here's your vegetable. And you can either eat this or you can wait till dinner, and she does not like that. But I like that idea of like I'm putting it back in her court. If she's really hungry, she's gonna eat the carrots. Like that's really what it comes down to. She's 4. She's holding out for what she thinks is something better. But I'm not playing that game. Come on to her.
That's wisdom. That's wisdom.
So, all right. So let's go back to this idea of using food to cope. So how does this start? Like, how do people start down this path? How do they kind of recognize that this is what's going on and it might need to be addressed?
Oftentimes, like there's that concept of mindfulness, but mindfulness requires a lot of intentionality. And as busy people, it's very easy to just blink and the whole day's gone by. So it's often quite helpful to just write down in a journal what the day kind of was like. And specifically, if we are targeting like emotional eating and what some of the cues and drivers are, it's helpful to look at when this happened, where was I? So, what was my social setting? Was I alone or with people? Like keeping the journaling quite basic, but also very targeted and intentional. And also, we can think about okay, what was the food available? Was it that I didn't have choice? Or was it like a buffet style and I made that choice when I had a lot of options? And then we also want to look at okay, well, portion size wise, if that's my struggle, what kind of plate size did I use? Could I have gone with a smaller plate and made it look fuller? Did I finish it simply because I'm having messages from my parents or my grandparents saying, you got to finish the plate? Or think about the people in developing countries and how they're suffering. And here we are being wasteful. And also being mindful of, okay, well, when I went grocery shopping, what were the marketing cues? Like, and the positioning of items at the grocery store. If we What I'm trying to do through journaling is help people understand that sometimes it all starts with bombardments of cues and stimulus that's coming from outside of us. And that's on top of whatever internal stimuli are happening, like stresses and struggling with all that. So by looking at it on pen and paper, and I do love pen and paper despite our very modern age of apps, is you really get to see like the issue is way more complex and broad, and it's way more than people just saying, well, just don't choose it, or just don't eat it, or maybe you don't have self control. And that's a lot of shaming, basically saying that you're lacking willpower, when what it is it's more about skill power. Like, let's look at the facts and let's do something about it by equipping ourselves with some tools.
So you led right into my next question, which is the mindset behind this, because so often it's like you said, it's just, we'll have more willpower. Just choose the salad, like, which is kind of deceptive in itself. I used to work at Applebee's restaurant, and one of our most popular salads was the number one item on the menu with the highest calories and fat content. It was kind of crazy. Like, just choose the salad doesn't always work either. But anyway, it's not always about willpower. Like you said, there's a lot more going on. And so how do we start kind of unpacking that beyond, like, once we start realizing what's going on, how do we start unpacking that and changing those patterns without getting into that shaming cycle, or that I'm just not strong enough cycle, or whatever? Like, how does give us some mindset here behind all of this?
Sure, sure. So from a mindset perspective, like, again, I like categorizing. I hate to think, like, I don't want anyone to be offended that I'm categorizing or trying to fit people into boxes, but I think it helps us conceptualize, like, where might we fall. So some categories that I have are mindset wise. Some people struggle with all or nothing thinking. So it's kind of like, well, I was trying to do this and I couldn't do it. So since I couldn't do it perfectly, let's just blow it all to bits, and I'm just going to have what I really want to have, or whatever. And it's very much like I either succeed or I fail, and there's no middle ground, and there's no failing forward or any of those more healthy strategies of
I
coping.
I failed on Monday, so I'm just going to wait till next Monday now.
That's
Just
right.
give up for the
That's
week.
right. And I'm like, I think if we're all being honest, I think in some way, shape, or form, we've all had some type of all or nothing thinking in our lives. Um, the second category would be negative self-talk. So in terms of mindset, I think if we pause and think about what we say to ourselves all day long, like, it's important to think, okay, what's the percentage of time that we're actually saying something nice to ourselves, about ourselves? And what's the percentage of time that we're saying not so nice things? I
Yeah.
don't know if you can comment, given, your record on speaking echoes, equilibrium echoes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, and especially you touched on moms earlier. I think we as moms are the worst when it comes to how we talk to ourselves and the expectations we place on ourselves. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, right. And then, like, another category is people using, the mindset is using food as a reward. So it's really difficult for people to reward themselves sometimes, because it's like, well, maybe just the time of day, the situation you're in, but food is so accessible. So then the mindset becomes, okay, well, I just aced my interview. I'm going to go have that fancy coffee drink.
Mm-hmm.
And the mindset is, I deserve the food because something wonderful happened. When really we can reframe that mindset to say, I deserve to book myself that manicure. I deserve that non food item to celebrate my success, or whatever it is. Um, and then finally, self esteem. So if people are struggling with lower self-esteem, sometimes they feel unworthy of making a positive change. It's almost like, I don't deserve the time of day, the effort, or the intentionality to help me feel better, have less pain, or have more energy, but everyone else in my life does. And I'm going to bend over backwards to make sure they get to go to their sport event or sporting, they get to go to the gym, they get to go to badminton class, or, meanwhile, I'm the one making it all happen. And as a chauffeur, I'm sitting, I don't know, 10 hours a day trying to just make life happen for everyone around me. And sometimes that stems from lower self esteem. Not always, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's like everyone else deserves everything that I'm not giving to myself.
Yeah. And sometimes it just comes down to practicality. Like by the time you've taken care of everyone else, you're tired, you're exhausted, the whatever, like there's nothing left to focus on taking care of yourself and making yourself a healthy meal because it's 11 p.m. and you're finally falling onto the sofa. And, um, you know, one of the things that has been so helpful for me is, and I'm sure you talk about this all the time as a dietitian, is just meal prepping. Like I've started on Sundays making things ahead of time because that 4:35 p.m. I'm finally done working and the kids are hungry. What's for dinner is the worst if I don't have a plan. Like it just all goes to pieces at that point. Um, so when you sit down with someone and you're kind of helping them unpack all of this and kind of figure out what the mindset is that they're struggling with and what the plan is and what does that look like? Like, let's say, someone kind of identifies themselves in one of those four categories. And then let's get into some practical things. Like if someone's like, yeah, I'm really struggling with this. I know I'm not eating healthy. I need to do better, but I'm stuck in this cycle of like whatever their particular cycle is. I'm going to start next Monday and then, oh, it's already November, whatever it is, November 13th. I'm just going to start on January 1st. And that,
Yeah,
like, give us some really practical things to start changing the daily cycle.
sure. So my number one thing would be, again, because I like paper and pen, I would just suggest try to keep 3 days worth of a food journal. And the reason why I so hope that people use paper and pen is because in the world of apps, it leads to an unhealthy obsession with numbers, like calories. Like even if you didn't mean to look at the caloric breakdown or the macronutrient breakdown, it does it all for you. So then the fixation becomes on the wrong place. Because what the more important thing to do, in my opinion, is just paper and pen. Again, we're all busy. Paper and pen seems tedious, but just do it for 3 days. Write down not only what you had, but what time you had it. And it can just be shorthand. Like, don't do a all or nothing kind of, oh, it has to be perfect and I have to write down every single thing in that sandwich, down to the teaspoon of mustard. Just write down 8 o'clock oatmeal, 12 o'clock sandwich, so forth, for 3 days that are typical. So don't do it when you're on vacation or going through a celebratory phase. Very typical 3 days. And then after you have that food journal, I say to the person, at this point, you're like Sherlock Holmes, I'm your Watson, and we're going to look at the facts here. What are the facts showing us? And I know it's just 3 days, but you told me it's the 3 typical days. So let's just look at this objectively because there's no good food, there's no bad food. Let's look at the facts. And are the facts appearing like, oh, I see that, the majority of the time that you're finally eating is in the evening time. Why might you think that is? And then someone will say, well, I have a young child. I put them to bed and I like eating hot food hot. Moms are probably smiling at this. And that's why I eat at 10 p.m. because that's when everything is settled and I can actually taste my food.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right. And I noticed that there's these long gaps of time between what seems to be breakfast and then, lunch. And it's like, oh, well, there's this and that and this and that. So the practical tip here is if you were to journal 3 typical days, one of the first things you look at is what time is your food intake happening? And
Mm-hmm.
then also, where are you actually eating? Because a lot of the times our struggle is actually based on location. So if you're eating in your bedroom late into the night, are we associating and creating unwanted psychological cues that when we're in bed, we are going to eat? And just like that Pavlov dog experiment, it's like
Mm-hmm.
now it's like I'm going to bed, I'm not hungry, but I've just established this cue for myself that I need to have something salty, like potato chips or whatever it may be. So by looking at objective data, we can look at, is it a time issue? Is it a location issue? And notice that we haven't even talked about what exactly we're eating. Because many people think that a dietitian hones in as the food police and looks at, well, just stop eating this and eat more of this. But a lot of the times the issues are when, where, and that plays into the what. Yeah, I know I shared a lot of things, but does that kind of resonate?
Yeah, that's really good. So let's say that we do notice a pattern, right? And the pattern, like, oh, let's just use the one you said. The pattern is getting in bed at 10 o'clock every night with a snack and watching TV before bed. First of all, why is that important to address? And second of all, how do we address that?
Yeah. It's important, like why it's important to address it is because late night snacking actually contributes to a lot of different health issues. So whether someone is living with prediabetes, diabetes, or higher cholesterol levels, like when we do a lot of nighttime eating, generally speaking, research tells us that late night eating involves higher fat, higher salt, higher sugar choices, and none of that is conducive to long-term health. So the why is, it's again not that any of those foods are bad choices, but can we redistribute that throughout the day or at different parts of the day so that we're not having a huge volume at the end of our day when we're less likely to actually use up that energy and be able to bring down our blood sugars. Simply, we don't have to be running a marathon, but even if we're just doing laundry or just active, to use some of that up, because most of us don't do that at midnight, after snacking a lot after a Netflix show. And how we manage that is a lot of the times we have to intentionally set alarms where it's unnatural for us to eat at certain times. So generally, people who may do a lot of late night eating, they do it because the front 75% of their day was spent not eating enough. So by the time that they're rested, relaxed, and in that nourish me phase, that's why they're hyperphagic and wanting to eat more. It's because there's something in the beginning part of the day. So oftentimes the how practicality is I'll ask people to use their smartphone to set alarms so that their main meals are not more than 6 hours apart. And that they also set a morning alarm. So people live very different lifestyles. Some people do shift work. Some people are young moms, old moms, or more mature moms, I should say. um, I get them to set an alarm so that the moment they wake up, they set a 2 hour timer. And if they haven't had breakfast within that 2 hour period, they got to put something in their mouth at that point. And then they can set a 6 hour timer or maybe a 4 hour timer. So that if by the 4 hour timer they still haven't eaten their next meal, they make it and then enjoy it between that 4 to 6 hour gap. And then that gets them slowly in the habit of more front loading those calories. And it doesn't mean that they can't have an evening snack in the evening as they enjoy a show, as they decompress from the day. But chances are they will have a lesser amount, enjoy it more slowly rather at a very fast pace, and then be able to really taste it for what it is. Like enjoy those chips and chocolates. Eat slowly and really allow yourself to bring the joy back of eating the food for the temporary comfort that you want, but in smaller doses.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some great tips. I hadn't really ever thought about that, but there have definitely been days. I mean, I have 5 kids. There are definitely days I get to 3 p.m. and I'm like, why am I so hungry? Oh, because I haven't actually eaten anything all day, and I have to be more mindful because oftentimes I will, like, my kids will get their own lunch while I'm in a meeting, and like things just, every day is different. So it depends. But that's where for me, the meal prepping is so helpful. Like if I have a salad in a jar to just pull out of the fridge that's ready to go, that makes a huge difference for me. So, I mean, this is not easy. Like we're not necessarily saying this is easy. Like just
Sure.
like changing any pattern or any habit, this can be really hard. I'm thinking of the mom that you just talked about, who um really likes to sit down and enjoy her food, a hot meal, and
Yes,
not be like
it's me basically. I'm talking about me.
not, shove a few bites in her mouth while trying to manage the chaos. And I think sometimes, one of the things I get into a lot when I'm in coaching and I'm doing conflict coaching in particular is thinking outside of the box. Like we have this mindset very often that it's either this or that, like he's right or I'm right, or this is right or this is wrong, or we think very black and white.
Mm.
But it doesn't have to be that way. So for example, for that mom with little kids, maybe the solution is cooking dinner at 5 p.m., sitting down and eating her dinner first, and then inviting her kids to come to the table and just staying and enjoying helping them, like being present with them. It can be something completely out of the box that might work for your family that we don't even think about. Like maybe there's an alternative here. And that is sometimes that creativity in finding solutions is such a big key here, isn't it?
It really is. And I like promoting that thought process in people that, all that creativity is in each one of us. We just have to unlock it or maybe have someone or something inspire us to, like you say, think outside the box. Is it okay if I share one common out of the box kind of strategy that I like
Yeah,
giving to new
absolutely.
moms?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So whether you're a brand new mom or you have a couple that you're trying to manage, like I challenge moms to treat themselves like an additional child. So if you have one, pretend you have two, so on and so forth. And how this plays out is, well, if you're going to make a lunch box or a lunch kit and then a recess snack and a water bottle for your children who are school age, just make a second one. Exact same food, water bottle, and everything, and set it side by side on the counter where you normally do it. And in that sense, you are providing for yourself on the same level that you are providing for your child. Because some moms deal with guilt um, in some way, shape, or form. Like the guilt is like, I'm going to take care of them, and then they have everything they need. Just like the majority of moms wouldn't send their child off to school without food and water.
But we do it for
I want them to
ourselves.
know. That's right. It's like how many moms can relate to, the kids are done, they're rushing off to work, they made it just in time, they sit down, they're starved, and now they have to wait for their designated lunch break, and then they didn't pack anything for themselves. So in the 30 minutes that they have are rushing to a drive-through because that's the only thing that can give them a hot meal within the window that they have, right?
Hmm.
So the tip is if you treat yourself like an additional child, just think of how well you treat your child, how you wouldn't send them off with food and water, and can you just eat the same thing to make your life a little less stressful? Barring any food allergies, like just do that because when we're truly biologically hungry, we just like children will eat what's available instead of going for what we maybe on a different mental level want.
Yeah.
And that's how we often can differentiate between biological stomach hunger and more heart and mouth hunger that's driven by more emotions and more just desiring a certain flavor or texture or temperature in our mouth.
That's a good thought too. Like, I think we're so used to not tuning in to our hunger cues. I mean, just like going until 3 p.m. without eating, and then all of a sudden it's like, why am I hungry? Oh, because I haven't really paid attention all day long to what my body was telling me. How do we start becoming more conscious of like the signals that our body is sending us and what it really needs?
Mhm. Um, I think one way of becoming more aware is setting those alarms on your phone because it's an external cue. It will ring and it will tell you that, oh, it's been 4 hours since I last ate something. And then you have a 2 hour prep time to treat that very isolated issue. Because as a person, like whether you're a mom or not a mom, Like you're basically needing someone or something to say, hey, take care of you. Hey, take care of you. And unfortunately, many of us like go an entire day without that loving voice. So in the absence of a loving voice saying, hey, did you eat lunch yet? Just like our own moms or our own loved people might call us to say, but they won't, because in today's day and age, a phone call means something terrible. It's usually a message. We need to just set those alarms. Another thing though, like a practical tip wise, I think one thing to become more mindful is when you do have a moment, like let's just say you have an hour to yourself, like um, I encourage people to do a walkthrough of their home environment and of their work environment. And what that walkthrough is, objectively, as if you were a detective going into a home to investigate a crime or something that's going on, take a look at where is the food in your home. And because in some households, the issue is that food is sprinkled everywhere. So being mindful of our surroundings means, are we keeping food in its place and centralizing it so that if we are hungry, we have to go to the kitchen? And by centralizing it and not having food and snacks sprinkled everywhere, it actually creates a mindfulness that when I am hungry, I have to move away from my work desk, go to the kitchen, sit at the table, set myself up to enjoy every mouthful of the food that I'm having. And then when I'm done, I put it away when I'm full. I'm not wasting food. I can put it in the fridge. You know, mom no longer lives with me, maybe. Telling me to finish that last bite, I'm just going to put it in the fridge. And then I'm going to go back. I'm going to leave the food eating environment, settle, and now I'm going to focus on work. Because mindfulness doesn't just happen. We kind of have to audit our lives and look at the surroundings and really give ourselves time and space to enjoy food for what it is rather than like just scrolling as we eat or watching something as we eat. Like pay attention um, um, to enjoy food, bringing the joy back to an experience that as humans, like we are hardwired to enjoy food, and I think we should keep that.
Yeah. Oh, so much good stuff here. So tell us, or tell the people listening how they can connect with you, who you work with, and what that looks like to come and work with you.
For sure. So people wanting to work with me, they can go to foodmysteries.com. That's where you'll find a lot of information. And we actually have a free giveaway. So if you want to sign up and put your email in, you'll actually get a document that outlines the hidden forces that are manipulating your eating. That kind of outlines a lot of the things that I talked about today. It's just a free downloadable PDF that you're welcome to sign up for. And then on the website, you may find that there are key pieces or other free information that is helpful. And then, like I say, if there are new moms out there looking to not only get some credible information that's evidence-based on whatever it is you're struggling with, starting solids with your 4 to 6 month old, or if it's something else, or joining a community of other new moms that are just wanting to journey together and feel a little less lonely, a little less isolated. We're trying to build this new project out so that people have somewhere safe, warm, and fuzzy to go so that they can nourish themselves, so that they can healthfully continue to pour into the new little lives that are, in front of them.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Angel, for being here and having this conversation with us. I think there are a lot of people who are going to find this very helpful. And if you're listening and you're interested in any of those resources or connecting with Angel, check the show notes. I'll put all of her links there, including how you can connect with her on her website and on social media as well. So thank you so much, Angel. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much. And all the best, everyone. Warm wishes during the holiday season.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit www.coachingwithalyssa.com/podcast. And while you're there, book your free consultation and download the preview of my new book, Marriage is Hard and Other Lies I Believed. I'll see you in the next episode.